Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our discussion of Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men. Today, we're going to get into the novel itself. In our last discussion, we simply covered some biographical elements of Cormac McCarthy, but it's good to know about him before you dig into this novel. Just a quick reminder, please not to distribute any of these materials. They're just meant for this course. Thank you. So we're going to look at the title of this novel, No Country for Old Men, and it's from a famous poem by W.B. Yeats, who's definitely one of the best poets of all time. Probably, some people argue, the best poet in the English language of the 20th century. So let me just quickly read this poem to you. That is no country for old men, the young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations of their song, the salmon falls, the mackerel crowded seas, fish, flesh or fowl, commend all summer long whatever is begotten, born and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect monuments of unaging intellect. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. Nor is there singing school, but studying monuments of its own magnificence. And therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. Old sages standing in God's holy fire as in a gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, purr in a gyre, and be the singing masters of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire and fastened to a dying animal, it knows not what it is, and gather me to the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make of hammered gold and golden enameling, to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past, or passing, or to come. The themes of this poem, the poem's about this anonymous old man, and he's traveling to Constantinople, and he feels the anguish of growing old, and he wants to sort of somehow transform himself from history into art. He's getting older, and he feels powerless, like so many old people do in our world. There's death in this world. He feels impotent in this world. And somehow he wants to render himself into the world of art, which is immortal. Art lasts forever. But really what this poem is about an old person who's feeling weak and frightened. And this, of course, would relate to Sheriff Bell in the novel. So what I would recommend is that you click on the link that I've given you in your course outline. It'll take you to Criterion On Demand, and just watch those timestamps of the first 3 or 4 minutes of the movie here. And then I'll assume that you've watched it, and I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the quotations that the film itself is covering. Here on page 3 and 4, it says, I sent one boy to the gas chamber at Huntsville, one and only one. My arrest and my testimony. I went up there and visited him 2 or 3 times. The last time was the day of his execution. I didn't have to go, but I did. I sure didn't want to. He killed a 14-year-old girl, and I can tell you right now, I never did have no great desire to visit with him, let alone go to his execution, but I done it. The paper said it was a crime of passion. He told me there was no passion to it. He'd been dating this girl, young as she was. He was 19. He told me he had been planning to kill somebody for about as long as he could remember. Said if they turned him out, he'd do it again. Said he knew he was going to hell. Told me about it out of his own mouth. I don't know what to make of that. I surely don't. I thought I'd seen a person like that now and then. Got to me wondering if maybe he was some new kind. Okay, so very important opening to the novel. It tells you what you need to know about the protagonist, Sheriff Bell. He's old, and he does not understand the new kinds of violence and criminals that are permeating his culture. And he doesn't know how to deal with them, and he doesn't know how to stop them. This young man that murdered a 14-year-old girl is utterly alien to Bell. He doesn't have any sort of moral alignment that Bell can recognize. And at the bottom of the page, it says, he was not hard to talk to, called me sheriff, but I didn't know what to say to him. What do you say to a man that by his own admission has no soul? What would you say? Anything? I thought about it a good deal, but it wasn't nothing compared to what was coming down the pike. And this is sort of leading us into Bell's description of Sugar. And if you skip down about 5 lines, it says, somewhere out there is a true and living prophet of destruction, and I don't want to confront him. I know he's real. I've seen his work. I walked in front of those eyes once. I won't do it again. I won't push my chips forward and stand up and go out to meet him. It ain't just being older. I wish that it was. I can't say it's even what you're willing to do, because I always knew you had to be willing to die even to do this job. That was always true. Not to sound glorious about it or nothing, but you do. If you ain't, they'll know it. They'll see it in a heartbeat. I think it's more like what you're willing to become. And I think a man would have to put his soul at hazard, and I won't do that. I think now that maybe I never would. So what he's saying, right to get the novel going here, is I'm retiring. And the reason I'm retiring is because I came up against Sugar. And it's not that I'm afraid to go up against him, but the only way to compete with him would be for me to change my moral compass and what I think is right and wrong, would be for me to break the boundaries of the law. That's the only way I can compete with someone like that, and I don't want to. I don't want to break everything that I stand for in my career. And he says later in the novel, I aim to quit, and the good part of it is just knowing I won't be called on to hunt this man. Because for Bell is old and he's frail, and obviously he would be killed if he went up against Sugar. But that's not the problem. He doesn't want to corrupt his soul in order to compete with Sugar. He doesn't want to become like Sugar in order to compete with him. He says on 299, you realize you come up against something you may very well not be equal to, and I think this is one of them things. And I'll just point you to page 306 here, and I'm just going to read the passage here. This is just before chapter 13. This is after Carla Jean's been killed, Moss has been killed, Sugar's been escaped. It says it was a cold, blustery day when he walked out of the courthouse for the last time. Some men could put their arms around a crying woman, but it never felt natural to him. He walked down the steps and out the back door and got in his truck and sat there. Couldn't name the feeling. It was sadness, but it was something else besides. And something else besides was what had him sitting there instead of starting the truck. He felt like this before, but not in a long time. And when he said that, then he knew what it was. It was defeat. It was being beaten. More bitter to him than death. You need to get over that, he said. And then he started the truck. So, he is beaten, ultimately, in this novel. By being, what happens by the end of the novel is that Sheriff Bell has a choice. He can try and compete with Sugar if he starts breaking the law and playing dirty the way Sugar does. Or he can refuse to break the law and uphold his moral compass and his sense of justice and let Sugar go. Because if he does that, there's no way he can compete with a new type of criminal like Sugar. Sugar has no compassion, no empathy. He's just almost like a killing machine. And Bell can't compete with that if he follows the law. When he says, here, I aim to quit, and a good part of it is just knowing that I won't be called on to hunt this man. Well, that goes right back to the opening of the novel about the boy in the electric chair, the young man in the electric chair. His crime is not a crime of passion, which would be something that Bell might be able to understand. It's not right, but he would have seen it before. Instead, his killing this 14-year-old girl is planned, and he said he would do it again. So it's a conscious decision to break a moral boundary. You don't kill people, especially children, for self-gratification. And so Bell's feeling lost and confused, like the old man in Yeats' poem. He's dealing with criminals who utterly ignore his moral order. He's encountering a new kind of evil, and as an old guy, he kind of feels that he's powerless against this new form of criminal. Now, typically, in a Hollywood thriller, and this novel is framed like a Hollywood thriller, it's kind of a thriller/western set in 1980. Typically, the hero will prevail in these Hollywood thrillers. That's not what happens in No Country for Old Men. In this novel, Moss dies, in the top right there. Carla Jean is killed for no reason. Carson Wells, the other bounty hunter, gets timid once he's captured and killed. Sheriff Bell declares that he's overmatched and he quits. And Chigurh, on the bottom right, he gets all the money and he survives and walks away. So the novel leaves us with no guarantee of any kind of meaning or redemption or purpose. Sheriff Bell never even identifies Chigurh. You'll notice in the novel and in the film that Bell wouldn't even know what he looks like. Chigurh's fingerprints are not on file. He's an absolute ghost. Sheriff Bell never closes the case. Moss, who's this third character, loses his life over the money, and Chigurh just carries on. In short, it's a story framed as a Hollywood thriller, and you'll see that when we watch the film, but it calls important philosophical issues into question about what's coming down the pike. A pike is like an old highway. They were all eventually replaced by superhighways in America, but these would be the old highways and the back roads. Well, Anton Chigurh, this man, is what's coming down the pike. He's a person with no charity, no grace, no compassion, no forgiveness, no empathy. But Sheriff Bell, the protagonist of the novel, is full of charity and grace. Now, if you think about it logically, how can he compete with Chigurh? Chigurh is willing to do anything to get what he wants. Bell represents the old ways, where there was a more unified, less fragmented sense of right and wrong. Chigurh represents a new, fragmented reality. And the old-timers like Bell can no longer deal with the newcomers like Chigurh. That's why the novel opens with the story about the boy going to the gas chamber. And that's why Sheriff Bell says on page 4, I think a man would have to put his soul at hazard. What he's doing, is he's trying to figure out, how do I compete with Chigurh? How do I catch him? I can't even catch up to him, much less catch him. And the only way I'm going to do that is if I become just as ruthless as him. So this is a novel about sort of a battle for the human soul. It elevates it above a typical Hollywood thriller. It's a more philosophical novel. Remember now, we're going to watch the film, but please remember, in the novel, Sheriff Bell is less competent than he is in the film. You can see him here on the left, played by Tommy Lee Jones. In the film, you get a sense that Bell is kind of mixed up in the investigation and has sort of participating in the action. But in the novel, he's much less competent. He's an observer. He's a little old and befuddled. He never, excuse me, he can't keep up with Chigurh, much less keeping up with Moss. But at the beginning, but nevertheless, the film is a very close adaptation of the novel. The screenplay was written by McCARTHY himself. But at the beginning and the end of both the novel and the film, Bell reminisces about old timers and what he thinks are better times, and he wonders where charity and grace have gone. And he really thinks about the breakdown of moral values in his culture. Near the end of the novel, he's having this conversation with another sheriff, and they're talking about, well, how did we get here? How did our country become so violent and disrespectful? Bell says it starts when you begin to overlook bad manners. Anytime you quit here and serve man, the end is pretty much in sight. And he raises a very important point. Like, where do we draw the line when where is it where we would consider to be stepping over the line into an unacceptable culture? There's no particular place you can draw the line in the sand. It's a gradual slide. And for Bell, he raises a good point. Well, if we don't treat each other with respect, strangers on the street, your family, your friends, that's where it starts. And it will not stop. It'll be a snowball effect. And ultimately, you'll end up with people like Chigurh here on the right. Chigurh has come. Chigurh is the end of Bell's world. As Bell calls him, Chigurh is a living prophet of doom. He's not a lunatic. He simply gets his job done. He's devoid of compassion. He's a symbol of this unstoppable wave of violence that will begin with bad manners. So the novel's very relevant. It asks, how do we slow violence down before it consumes our culture entirely? Can justice prevail at all in our violent times? That's what the novel's asking. And it has a bleak answer. So I would encourage you just to go back and watch again the first 3 or 4 minutes of the film. There's the timestamps there. And then we'll dig a little deeper into the novel next time. Thank you.